Rewilding by Jacqueline Contino.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. Today I'm going to talk to you about a research project I did applying zoo enrichment to orphan black rhinos to promote successful rewilding. So I did this through Miami University's Project Dragonfly, and I already connected with some fellow dragonflies here, which I love. And this was at the Zululand Rhino Orphanage that we now know all about, thanks to the lovely Karen Odendall's talk this morning. So a little bit about me. I'm not a zookeeper. My background is mostly with veterinary and wildlife. I started off in the vet world. I'm still there, but I meandered a little bit. After my bachelor's, I shadowed a wildlife vet in South Africa. One thing led to another. I became a safari guide. Then that kind of fell into trails guiding, which is what we call safari guiding on foot. And I loved that. This was tracking animals on foot, learning so much about their behavior and their environment, and just relying on both to keep myself safe and the animals safe. I got a job in Zululand Park doing walking safaris. And I've come to learn that a lot of your rhinos, zoos from all over America, and now I learned Dublin as well, have come from this park, known as the stronghold of rhino conservation, their abundant rhino population. It just blessed us with regular encounters. We got to know their habits, their family dynamics, and there were a few that we saw almost every day that we really grew to know and love. One in particular, that's him there, that's the old man. The old man I refer to as the model citizen rhino. He was strong and calm, but so respectful and commanded so much respect. He wasn't the largest rhino, but he had the most beautiful territory, and I saw him fight off larger rhinos too. He welcomed in all species that would show him respect, including us. Ladies loved him. The young males, that respected him, he shared his space with, and he just had a powerful presence. I looked up to him. One day I went down to work. I arrived at the lodge to start my day, and I'm greeted by one of my coworkers that's like, Jackie, there was an incident last night, poaching incident, and they got the old man. The poachers killed the old man for his horn. Yeah, I mean, we had, as Karen spoke a lot about, Zululand Park, we're not strangers to poaching incidents. But as messed up as it sounds, it's different when it's one that you're very close to. So yeah, we all put our heads together and we tried to come up with different ways that we could avenge him, or, I don't know, just do something, and ultimately nothing really was done. So I had to move on and do the only thing that I could think of doing for him, and that was volunteer at the Zululand Rhino Orphanage. So after arriving there, given all my experience with wild rhinos and their family dynamics, I understood them and what they were used to. And then with my veterinary experience, I was able to contribute to their critical care, especially the young ones like this. This is Leko here. This is the one actually I believe Karen mentioned, not necessarily there to a poaching incident, but because his mother wasn't producing milk. He's not that little anymore. He's this big guy who was just released back to the wild a couple months ago, which is so exciting. But anyway, I just honed these skills, and I felt like this is something I'm so passionate about. I want to devote myself to, but unfortunately my visa ran out, so I went home, and I did maintain contact with someone named Marshall Smith. She's the former ZRO, Zululand Rhino Orphanage manager, who's just excellent. She has such a way with these rhinos, and I learned so much from her. But so I'm talking to her from the States, and I'm like, you know, Simone, is there anything that I can help, you know, I can do from this end? And she's like, you know what, we're getting a lot of rhinos these days, and I would love if you can look into enrichment, because they need something, they need stimulation, and I just don't have the time. And I was like, absolutely, I would love to. So at this point I had an idea of what enrichment was, but it was very surface level. And the more I got into it, I started to understand just how necessary it can be in this setting. You know, as most of you guys know, young rhinos, they're gonna stay with their mother for the first 3 to 5 years of their life. And they're learning the species-specific behaviors, they're learning how to be a rhino. And this is oftentimes why they're more susceptible to poaching mothers, because having that baby by your side does slow you down. So the orphans are left behind if they're lucky enough. They're found and brought to the orphanage. But then, of course, that role of the rhino mother is on the shoulders of the orphanage staff. And perhaps enrichment can help to ease that pressure. So that got me starting to look into enrichment usage in rhino orphanages in South Africa. And I wanted to see, like, what are the protocols? Are there any standards? What are people talking about? What are people doing? I did not find a whole lot. I found this study was the most recent study surveying wildlife rehabbers in 2010 that indicated a desire to increase standardization and enforcement of practices. However, lack of communication between facilities contributed to the difficulty. And that, coupled with the fact that most animals reintroduced from captive settings tend to lack necessary behaviors to survive and reproduce, such as vigilance, predator avoidance, foraging skills. So this got me thinking about a lot of you guys, zoo personnel, the ones that have extensive standardization and enrichment protocols and have come up with creative innovation and enrichment ideas. And I thought, wow, well, what a match made in heaven. So I start preparing for my field study. After working with Simone at the orphanage, and my university had started my master's by now, and for about 1.5 years, we're working on this, particularly Dr. Jill Korach was incredible, and Sarah Navarro, I know some of you guys know her from Cincinnati Zoo. So I conducted this literature review, which included an informal survey of rhino keepers exploring which enrichment would be most effective bringing out naturalistic behaviors, which some of you might remember me from. I might have talked to some of you during that time, which is really awesome. And this is a summary of my findings specifically regarding black rhinos. I'm not going to go into this too much, especially that a lot of it is stuff that I learned from some of you guys. But I just think some of the more profound stuff is with a lot of really simple installments, particularly like vegetation screenings and browse hangers that are not only obvious, like feeding and environmental enrichment, but also promoting natural soundscape, which can increase, is proven to increase vigilance to alarm calls, interspecies interactions, and vocalization, variety, and frequency, which is huge for rewilding purposes. So I used that pilot study to propose my field study, which I had to get IRKA approval, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, but this is just what you need when you're doing a study with animals. And then once that was approved, it was all about learning how to actually build the enrichment, because again, not from the zoo world, this is all from books. So I'm like, oh, okay, now I have to learn how to do this. And I will say, Josiah House was instrumental in really all 3 of these steps. And I am very honored, and I really admire, you know, I can't see him looking this way because I think he's this way. But, oh, there you are. Yeah, for just being such a team player, and you'll see some of those handouts there are actually some things that he typed up, and Host to Habitat as well. So there were a lot of people that made this possible. I'm really appreciative for all the teamwork. Eventually, after enough practice and prep, I made my way back to my home away from home, South Africa, back to Zululand Rhino Orphanage. And all along the way, I'm sourcing materials, some from friends that have collected for me over there, local fire departments, dumpsters. It was just like great, the dump. And Facebook Marketplace was also excellent. This is Beji. Beji is a 5-month-old black rhino. Now, when I arrived to the orphanage for my study, the current manager, who unfortunately isn't here, but here with us in spirit, Blake Bucas, introduced me to Bejan, or Beji for short. Blake wanted me to focus on Beji as she was the only black rhino at the orphanage at the time, and the first one they had there in several years. After getting to know Beji and the flow of the orphanage once again, I put together a proposal and I presented it to Blake and Karen, and together all of us made a plan to execute. And I will also say the entire staff was so open to just learning about the project and enrichment and teaching me so much. And again, I'm really grateful for them and that beautiful partnership. So just a couple things my proposal included. Sorry if this is a little bit blurry. Let me see, yes. With Beji at the focus of the study, it was really largely about converting a lot of the structures from that of a grazer to that of a browser. So you see, particularly with a lot of the feeding structures, you might recognize that's Josiah House's swinging pellet feeder, PVC pellet feeder. A lot just to promote that proper spinal health and posture and lip dexterity and things like that. Just hanging the entire feeder upright, making more of a trough. A fire hose veggie feeder, that's also a hose to habitat. And then most of you guys, I'm sure all of you guys probably know how feisty black rhinos can be. So we need things for them to wrestle. That was the punching bag and deadfall, things like that. And then the browse hanger so that she could be secluded and have just the option of that comfort there. And then being that the reserve or the orphanage was within a larger reserve, we had access to other black rhinos dung, so we were able to make conspecific scent trails, which were, of course, great for just processing hormones and learning things like that, but also she would eat it, which would promote proper gut flora, which is a great added bonus. Okay, executing our plan. So once we were all set, I observed Beji for a couple of days prior to implementing anything. This was just so I could have a baseline to compare how her activities changed after implementation. And I will note in between there was also an acclimation period for the pre and post observation, just so she could kind of get over that neophobia. And while I'm doing all of this, I'm also building the enrichment, collecting any materials that I might need, and this is all with the help of the orphanage staff and contractors, and we had a lot of fun doing it too. So this is just some insight on what it looked like before. You can see it's just much more adapted to that, to a white rhino. We have a lot of wide open spaces and things like that. That's her mud wallow there that she had not yet been seen. She had only been there a couple of months before I arrived, but she had not yet been seen using that mud wallow, which, really they have to be comfortable to start using that wallows. That just indicated, a little of her discomfort. And that's the corner there where she had spent a lot of her time. Some of her feeding structures, again, just more for a grazer. She's like bending down like that, and then a lot of hand feeding, which of course has its time and place in terms of training, but just not necessarily most efficient for every single feeding. And this is after. So you can see she's finally comfortable to mud wallow. We put a lot of browse hangers and things like that to really make that area very secluded. A lot of reports indicated the importance of having a lot of scratching posts also around the mud walls, so we could really foster a lot of that grooming and self-maintenance behavior. We have this browse curtain, which is so simple. I was talking about this a little bit at the enrichment workshop, where it was just hanging a beam across with a couple of posts, and we would mix in browse, adding fresh browse every day, so it was a mixture of dry and fresh. So she would kind of have to practice a little bit of that selectivity with her foraging, and also just having the opportunity to hide behind something and interacting with them, especially with the wind, since their eyesight's not the greatest. She would see some of that browse kind of flowing in the wind, and it would give her something else to spar with. She was using a lot more of her enclosure. She had a lot of areas that she could now rest and relax in the shade. Taking full advantage of a lot of her scratching posts. You can see that we were very careful to make sure that we had scratching posts of all different sizes and shapes to accommodate any part of her body that she might want to scratch, particularly the flanks, the neck, the horn, of course, the belly, things like that. And then lots to explore. So we had a lot of deadfall that included root balls and things like that she could chew on and start getting into that kind of behavior, tasting a whole bunch of different things. We have to play this. And having things to wrestle and, being able to interact with things that would interact back. So this is Veggie wrestling with her, or sparring with her tire punching bag. And then, yeah. I know this, I don't know who's having more fun, her actually interacting with this or us watching her. We can watch this all day. And then the dung scent trails were also excellent. I thought that she would enjoy more having an actual trail to follow, but I think maybe it was just a matter, it was more naturalistic, but I think it was just a matter of maybe not having enough to really replicate that, because when we just confined it to one pile, she was like obsessive over this. She kept coming back to it. It was really, really effective. It was awesome. And these are some of the feeding structures. So you can see that pellet feeder there. She's really working that prehensile lip. There was a little bit of troubleshooting we had to do with that. I think maybe because she was so young and she really did not have a lot of practice with that lip dexterity. So we initially had to make, the hole was a little bit too small, and then we tried to make it a little bit bigger, and then we were losing a lot of pellets and it wasn't cost effective and a hygiene issue. So I just modified it there with just a little strip of tire, and that did the trick perfectly. You see she has a lot of the browse hangers and things like this, and the orphanage was already hanging a lot of fresh browse every single day, but it was just a matter of beefing that up a little bit more and then highlighting key areas that we wanted her to spend more of her time, like mud wall in particular. And then you can see her using the hose to habitat fire hose feeder there, which really required a lot of critical thinking. Like you could see her as she was using her horn to move the feeder around to access different foods from different sides. So that was really exciting. Just some of the raw data here. So you can see, like I said, 3 days before, 3 days after enrichment, with the acclimation period in between. Her resting behavior, it more than halved, so she spent a lot more time just interacting with her environment, more stimulating. Her feeding time increased quite a bit. Her investigation curiosity, having a lot of things to explore, nearly quadrupled. We have her self-maintenance also increased tremendously. Fearful behavior, things like cowarding in the corner, that decreased tremendously. Exercise nearly quadrupled, and discomfort, things like whining, crying, panting, things like that, decreased tremendously as well. And I totally understand this is one subject over just a couple days. There was a lot of variables, especially after the implementation of enrichment. We had a lot of construction going on. So this is definitely needing to be repeated. We need larger scales. But it really, my interest in sharing this is just spreading the information, hoping that it raises some awareness and inspiration in these kind of collaborative projects. There's so much that we can learn from each other, and as also was highlighted by Josiah's presentation too, how we can benefit so much just by collaborating. Microsoft PowerPoint is not responding.